Welcome, friends. James Corbett here at CorbettReport.com. Today's the 2nd of September, 2015, and probably the 1st of September, wherever on earth Jeff Berwick is these days. Jeff Berwick, you will, of course, remember as the host of Anarchapulco 2015, where I spoke earlier this year. And, of course, he does live in the beautiful climes of Acapulco, Mexico. Jeff, great to see you again. How's Anarchapulco treating you today?
Anarchapulco is treating me great. We got a beautiful sunset in behind me here, and we just announced the next Anarchapulco in 2016, coming up February 19th and 21st. I know you might have some family obligations to take care of at that time, so you might not make it, but it should be a good time.
Well, I'll try my best to make it, but we'll have to see. As you say, family comes first. So let's get right into it today, talking about what everyone in the world is talking about right now, and something that you're very much in the heart of, and this is Shemitah. So for people who don't know, of course, Jeff is at dollarvigilante.com, but you can also see his latest viral video sweeping the internet, Shemitah Exposed, Financial Crisis Planned for September 2015. And he's not only the creator of that viral video, and his name is not only trending on Google right now itself, but he's also just finished a book, I had the title here, Shemitah Trends, The Plot to Enslave Humanity and Find Freedom. So a lot to talk about today, Jeff, and I think maybe we should start just by outlining the fact that you and I agree on so much when it comes to this economic calamity that is coming, that we've just seen the beginning of with the market mayhem last week. That was just a sign of the instabilities that are there in the market, the fact that things have been massively overinflated. The equities markets specifically have been massively overinflated by all of this liquidity that's been pumped in, by all of this easing over the years. The last several years, things are coming to a head. I don't think we disagree with that at all. But no one's here to hear what we agree about. People want to hear what we disagree about. And I think Shemitah is going to be a point of contention for us. So first, let me give you the floor. Please tell us, what is Shemitah? What is happening? What is going on? What is coming?
Sure. As you know, James, I started the Dollar Vigilante in 2010, and that's because I foresaw sometime within the next decade, and I said probably between 5 and 10 years, that this entire financial system will collapse, the U.S. dollar, all fiat currencies will collapse. It was all based on just looking at the numbers and the way things were progressing. And it wasn't and so we're now just entering into the time frame when I said things might start to happen in 2015, so 5 years later. And it was about a year ago I read this book by Jonathan Cahn called The Harbinger, and it talked about all the events about 9/11, which, as you know very, very well, isn't exactly what they told us about on CNN. And I'm with you 100% on that. And I'm actually a rabid 9/11. I just read anything I can on it because it's sort of like a hobby of mine. I just can't believe they they didn't totally get away with it, but a lot of people still don't know what happened. And so Jonathan Cahn was talking about how this was all related to the Bible. And I'm not I'm not a religious person. I don't do anything organized religion, but I am a fairly spiritual person. I think the Bible does have some very interesting things in it, but I've never really paid attention to it. But he was talking about how in the Bible it was almost written how this 9/11 was going to happen, and how everything that played out, there was actually parts of the Bible and prophecies that said this would happen in one way or another. And I thought that's interesting. But the one thing that he talked about was something called the Shemitah. And that's what really caught my interest, because he said on the first day after 9/11, when the U.S. stock markets opened, was on September 17th, 2001. And that was the exact end day of the Shemitah. Now, for people who don't know what the Shemitah is, very briefly, it's in the Judaic religion, and it's written in their Torah and somewhat in the Bible as well about every 7 years you're supposed to forgive all debts. And it's also known as a time of washing away. And so I was looking into that, and on the exact end date of the Shemitah in 2001 was September 17th, and that was the biggest point collapse ever in history on the Dow on that very day, on the end day of the Shemitah in 2001. Now you fast forward to 2008, and the last day of the Shemitah in 2008 was September 29th, which also had the biggest point drop of all time, exactly 7 years from the last Shemitah. So that caught my interest, and I thought, well, this is very interesting. And on that day in 2008, it's the only known day on the New York Stock Exchange where the opening bell wouldn't ring. So that was interesting. And then as well, the stock market that day fell 777 points. And the Shemitah has all these sevens tied into it. And so I thought, well, this is quite interesting. The last two major market collapses, major crashes, happened on the exact end day of the Shemitah. So I said, okay, what happened in 1994? And there wasn't anything exactly on that day in 1994, but 1994 was a really rough year. It was known as the global bond market massacre, and there was a lot of problems. A lot of countries essentially went bankrupt that year, and currencies collapsed. And then I look back at the last one before that, so 7 years before, 1987, that was Black Monday. And that happened in October. So that happened about a few weeks after the Shemitah end day in that year. But that was the biggest percent crash of all time. And then you keep going back further and further, and it always seems to be some sort of major crisis or collapse happening around these Shemitah dates. And so I started watching this year. Shemitah lasts a full year, so it started in last September. And I was watching that on the very day that the Shemitah year began. The markets began a major decline. They actually declined about 7% over a few weeks, starting on the first day of the Shemitah. So I said, well, this is very interesting. I want to see what happens in the next Shemitah end day, and that happens to be September 13th of this year. So that's actually a Sunday, so we're not going to see any market collapse on that day or anything, but these things don't necessarily have to happen on the exact day. They tend to happen around this time, and that's why you actually see a lot of stock market collapses. A lot of people equivocate October with collapses because, well, not because, but it also seems to be right around these Shemitah dates all the time. And so I then looked into what's going on around those dates, and that's what really caught my interest. And I started to figure out that there's some things being planned in one way or another for this September that could get very interesting.
All right, you laid a lot on the table there. So for people who are interested in my own take on this, I just wrote for the International Forecaster, I just wrote an editorial, is the world going to end on September 23rd, 2015, kind of tongue-in-cheek at some of the predictions that are being made. I know that you're not necessarily making all of those types of predictions, but let's just go through some of the things that we've just outlined there. Because, for example, you lay out that list of dates that have happened around Shemitah in the last 7-year cycle, and there's one before that and the one before that. Very convincing when you put it in those terms, but let's look at it more deeply. This is confirmation bias 101, I think, right here. Elul 29 of September of 2008, September 29th, you had the 777 point drop on the markets. Amazing. Right on the button. Elul 29 of 2001, September 17th. That was the big market plunge in 2001. Amazing. Right on the button. 1994, there was some kind of bond market rout taking place sometime around then. 1987, well, a few weeks later, there was Black Monday. 1973, the Twin Towers were constructed, and Roe v. Wade made abortion legal, which is what Jonathan Cahn talks about anyway when it comes to this. 1945, there were World War II victory parades at the time of Shemitah. 1937-38, the early stages of what was to become World War II, although that didn't actually technically start till 1939. 1930-31, the early stages of the Great Depression, although the stock market collapse happened in 29. 1917 to 1918 was the entry of America into World War I. Also the fall of the Ottoman Empire. That's a rather strange thing. But again, all of these things I've heard people who are propounding the Shemitah say, sometimes it's on Elul 29, sometimes it's around that date, sometimes it's a very specific event, sometimes it's just sort of a general thing that's happening in the world during that year. I mean, you have to see, this is not prediction of anything. This doesn't tell us anything about what's going to happen.
Yeah, I actually wrote it and said that this could be just totally, if you can find patterns in almost everything, especially if you're looking for them. But it's not like I'm looking at all of those dates in the past. I'm just looking mostly at the last two. And that's the days that they fell on the exact date. And then when I started looking into this September, and so this is when I got really interested, I started looking into, okay, what else is happening around September 13th of this year? And there's a lot of stuff happening. Jade Helm, which started on July 15th, is supposed to end on September 15th. And as you know very well, many sort of disasters or false flag events usually are actually the government's running a some sort of a preparation for it at the exact same time that it happens. So that was very interesting to me. And I've been watching the movements of all these tanks and everything moving around the U.S. Again, it's supposed to end on September 15th. So I found that very interesting. The IMF managing director, Christine Lagarde, did a bizarre speech last year talking about the magic number 7, and it was really bizarre coming from the director of the IMF. And then there was another French foreign minister said in 2014 that we have 500 days to avoid climate chaos, and that day actually
But why would we listen to that garbage? People are saying that nonsense every day. We've heard that for years. We heard, we have 5 years to avoid climate chaos. We have 10 years. I've heard that a million times, and I've never believed it once. Why would I care about some French...
Well, I'm just saying these are things that have happened that are very interesting. So 500 days from that date is September 24th, I believe. Then on September 16th and 17th, this is very interesting. That's when the Federal Reserve meets, and they've been talking for a while now about the 0.25% interest rate hike, which alone could totally destroy the entire financial and monetary systems. It's so loaded with debt now. And interestingly enough, the Federal Reserve moved out of New York a couple of months ago and moved to Chicago because of fears of a natural disaster. And they're meeting September 16th and 17th. On the 15th, there's the United Nations is having its 70th Jubilee session, where leaders from around the world are coming, and also the Pope is going to be around for that kind of a thing. Then the Pope is meeting with Congress on the 24th, I believe, and then he's going to be doing another UN meeting where they're going to roll out what looks like Agenda 2030, which is advancing the Agenda 21 sort of a thing, essentially moving towards some sort of one world government sort of a thing. So all of these things combined have my interest, and I think it's definitely some interesting things going on. And of course, I've been predicting, and you know this very well, that we're not very far away from major, massive financial crisis. And so I've just been looking at these dates in September and saying, well, if anything's being planned, it looks like it's all something in September, and that happens to be around this date. So that's where I picked up on it. And of course, we'll see what happens. We just entered September now, so we'll see what happens. But it's on my radar.
Well, I 100% agree with the Federal Reserve rate hike FOMC meeting, September 16th, 17th. They'll announce it on the 17th. That's something I'm going to definitely have my eye on because, again, as you say, their rate hike could completely and utterly throw the economic train off the rails and start a huge market rout. So, and everything in preparation for that, as you know, they telegraph what may be coming and markets react to that. Absolutely part of the destabilization that's going on. So I agree. And all of those events you're talking about do happen in September. But I would say if you look at pretty much any month with that kind of scrutiny, you're going to find things of interest. I mean, the Pope travels to speak at a lot of different things all the time. Again, I'm not trying to downplay what you're saying here. There's a lot of things that are coalescing in September. I just don't like these predictions that are not predictions. They're not falsifiable. They don't say anything about what's going to happen, so that there's no way on October 1st that you can come back and say, you know what, I was wrong. It didn't happen in September. I mean, what would have to happen in September for you to go, oh, you know what, the Shemitah, that was all garbage?
Well, in reality, I put out that video, Shemitah Exposed, on July 14th, and I said around the fall there's going to be a major crisis, and it's not necessarily just because of the Shemitah, and we're already down about 2,500 points. We had the biggest intraday drop in the Dow of over 1,000 points last week. Even today was down about 500 points. So when we actually had some investments that we told our subscribers about, just to prepare on the off chance there is some sort of crisis happening this fall, and one of them's already up thousands of percent. So in a sense, we're already kind of generally right in the ballpark of there's going to be a problem coming here, but we're going to see what happens. But wouldn't you agree with me, and you know a lot about these occult sort of societies, Masons, Illuminati sort of stuff, they like numerology, they like symbology. Perhaps they're just using this sort of Shemitah thing as just something, one of those things they do that they adhere to. And of course, on Wall Street, this has been very well known for decades, the 7-year cycle, they call it. It's just a very well known thing on Wall Street that it seems like it goes through 7-year cycles, but they never really nailed it down to something like the Shemitah dates. And just the fact that the last two fell on the exact end day of the Shemitah is enough for me to say, well, maybe they're going to do that again. I have no idea.
Well, we have no idea. That's true. Well, the numerology thing is interesting, but it's always interesting in retrospect. We always look at an event after it happened and say, oh, look, that lines up with that, or that number, has significance there. I have never, ever, ever seen anyone predict anything with any accuracy on using numerology. Never. And I don't think they want to telegraph what they're going to do. Like, hey guys, let's do this on a little 29 every single time. I don't think that's going to happen. But hey, what do I know? I mean,
Another interesting thing that sort of ties into it is the Jubilee. So after every 7 Shemitahs, so after every 49 years, is something called the Jubilee. And this is in the Judaic religion. So supposedly, on this year, the Jewish people are supposed to get land given back to them that was stolen from them. And on the last 2 Jubilee years, the last one was 1967. That's when Israel won the 6-Day War. And defeated all the other Arab countries around them. And in the one before that, in 1918, I believe, was when there was the Battle of Haifa, and the British Empire essentially took over Jerusalem at that time. So both those happened on the Jubilee. And then you look at this is called the Jubilee session of the UN, and one of the main things that's going to be put on the table at this that week of the UN during the Jubilee year, as it just starts, is going to be a vote to make Palestine its own country. So that's interesting as well. So there's a lot of interesting things that may or may not tie into this sort of a thing, but there seems to be some sort of a pattern.
Well, okay. There seems to be some sort of a pattern. I don't know. I get what's happening here, that people are kind of picking up on all of the instability that's building up in the markets right now. They know that something big is happening, that, as you and I agree, there is a huge financial calamity coming, and people are picking up on that, and it's kind of, the Shemitah thing is a way for people to focus their attention on that. The problem and the danger for that, for me, is that if we say, oh, it's all coming down in September, if October 1st comes around and the markets still look relatively the same, people are going to go, all right, all a bunch of junk, let's forget all of that conspiracy nonsense. And to me, that does a disservice to this information, because it isn't about this particular month. It's about what the future of humanity, really. I mean, we're really playing a game for all the marbles at this point when we talk about the global economy and the coming global government. So I don't want to say that, I don't want to put my eggs in that basket so that when that basket gets taken away, everyone just starts ignoring this. You know what I mean? I don't want this to center around Shemitah as a concept, because it can so easily prove to not be the case. And in that case, who ends up with egg on their face, and who ends up looking like they're so smart for poo-pooing it?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of risk. It takes a lot of guts to say what I feel is happening. But I do feel there is something happening around September, October of this year for a number of other reasons as well. Even Martin Armstrong, a trends forecaster who was actually jailed for 10 years because he apparently had a computer model that was able to really predict the crashes in markets and even government collapses. He said in the 1980s at least, that there's going to be a massive crisis, collapse, or paradigm shift in politics and money on October 1st of this year. So there's just a lot of people talking about this time period. So I wanted to make people aware of what's going on. And it's not just about the Shemitah. It's about Jade Helm. It's about the Federal Reserve moving out of New York to Chicago for no explainable reason. It's about NORAD moving into the Cheyenne Mountains because they're worried about an EMP attack. There's a lot of things going on that are factual and seem to be all happening around the same time. So I'm not saying that for sure. Well, obviously on September 13th, we're not going to see a major market collapse. That's Sunday. But I'm paying attention to this time period for a number of reasons, and a lot of them are based on factual evidence.
Well, there are a lot of worrying things, including the Fed rate hike and things of that nature, and the Fed moving its New York offices to Chicago and all of that. I mean, there is some craziness going on. No one can deny that. Although, actually, I've seen that apparently because the Elul 29 is calculated based on the new moon sighting in August, that some people are saying that Elul 29 is actually September 11th/12th. So who knows even what date this is all supposed to be on.
I'm no expert on it. I just found out about the Shemitah, like I said, last year from Jonathan Kahn. And just the fact the last two major market collapses happened on the exact date was enough for me to start looking into it. And then, as I pointed out, as I saw all these things happening, Jade Helm's really interesting. It's been really quiet so far. Of course, there's a media blackout on most of it, but they've mostly just been moving things around. And I just... I've seen so many videos just in the last few days of massive. You almost can't believe how many tanks they have on these trains, like literally hundreds, and it goes by for 5 or 10 minutes, and all over the country. Some are going to San Francisco right now. They're all over. There was one in Idaho, one in Mississippi, one in, I believe, North Carolina, all in the last few days, just moving massive amounts of equipment around. So who knows? I have no idea if anything's being planned or if this is all coincidental. But I think it's of importance to say what's going on, and for people to know about this information, because none of this information that we're talking about right now, no one would know about it unless I had said something about it in July. And as you pointed out, I think some of the top trending terms right now on Google are the Shemitah, Jeff Berwick, my name, and the Dollar Vigilante. So this is getting spread a lot. But I've said in the video and in all my writing ever since then, I don't know if anything's going to happen, but if anything is going to happen, it looks like they're planning for something around September or October. It just seems that way to me. But as I said, even if it doesn't happen, if nothing at all happens, which I highly doubt, by the way, I haven't even gotten into all the military actions going on right now around the world. We could see just something major happening any time now. The U.S. is saber rattling with China. They're in the Ukraine now. Russia and China are moving troops and preparing and doing military exercises right around the Ukraine. Just today, I believe Vladimir Putin said he's sending in fighter jets to Syria to bomb ISIS, which the U.S. is already doing that, but the U.S. is doing it. Well, they're actually really not doing that. Actually, the U.S., I think, is a supporter of ISIS and created ISIS. But you've got Russian planes and U.S. planes flying around in the Ukraine right now. In Syria right now. They've been doing all kinds of other actions all around the world. So even militarily, something could happen at some point. So I'm just pointing out that this looks like a very precarious time. And now with the markets already starting to head into collapse, it's making a lot of things happen. So I'm just putting out that information. If nothing happens, great. But be prepared, because there is going to be a financial collapse that is going to be of a level that no one has ever seen before, coming probably in the next few months or maybe next year, not much more than that. My longest time prediction in the past was 2020, but I think things are really going off the rails really fast right now.
Well, again, we can agree on that. Things are going off the rails, and people should already be prepared and be preparing if they're not prepared. By all sorts of different methods, and I list a bunch of them at the end of my International Forecaster editorial, but more to the point, you have just finished your book, Shemitah Trends, The Plot to Enslave Humanity and Find Freedom. Tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. The book itself isn't just all about the Shemitah. It actually talks about how we've all become enslaved over the last few centuries by governments and central banks, and how that allows them to do these sort of events. For example, in the Great Depression, that's fairly well proven now that the Federal Reserve increased the money supply throughout the 1920s, and then it looks like on purpose cut it by about 30% in 1929, which caused a massive market collapse, caused the Great Depression. And then they bought up assets at pennies on the dollar. So they've done that before. So there's no reason to think they might not do that again. And so they may be planning, and by the looks of everything the U.S. government's doing, it's looking like they're trying to destroy their own economy. Every single thing they do, all the regulations. It was Jerry Seinfeld had a lemonade stand with his kids the other day that got shut down by cops. There's just regulations, increasing minimum wage, which destroys jobs, the taxes, the police state that's rolling out. That's another very interesting thing. They're trying to cause civil unrest in places like Baltimore and Ferguson, which were doing fine except for the police. And so there's a lot of crazy stuff going on. I think people just need to be aware of it. And so I figured by putting it together in a package that talks about the Shemitah and these possibilities and things that could happen in September, I think it wakes people up to what's really going on and to prepare for what is coming, because it is coming and it's just a matter of time now. And we'll see what happens, but I'm definitely being very cautious for the next few months. I'm, have a lot of. I'm mostly out of the financial markets, except for to short them, and that's been doing very well for me and our subscribers for the last month. And getting into things like hard assets, precious metals, things like that. Also, I advise just getting out of the U.S. as you've done, as many of us have done. I'm here in Mexico. It's just getting worse and worse up there, and there's less opportunity. The economy's crashing, and there's very little freedom left in the U.S. You can hardly do anything anymore. So these are all just issues I wanted to bring, and I found with what's going on in September with all these interesting things that to put together in a video the potential of what could happen. And I still think something fairly major is going to happen in September from what I'm seeing.
And of course, your main website is dollarvigilante.com, but you also have surviveshemitah.com.
Yeah, surviveshemitah.com. You can see the video that we've been talking about that you're not sure about, but I figured, we always talk about the past and talk about these plans that happened in the past. Why not talk about them before they happen and see what happens? What I actually said and what I think is so many people are finding out about it that if they did have some sort of plan, for example, here this could be the plan. I'm just brainstorming here, that they're going to bring in, they're going to revalue certain currencies perhaps in September. The Federal Reserve is going to raise rates. The markets are going to tank. There's going to be civil unrest in the U.S. as the U.S. dollar starts to collapse. Vladimir Putin today said that they're not going to use the dollar anymore for their transactions with most of their trading partners just today. So if they were planning to do all that, and if everyone's watching in September expecting some sort of crisis, it's possible that we might make them not do it in September. Of course, they'll do it later. They'll do it in November or December or whenever. But this could be the first time that we've delayed something that might have been planned, because literally millions of people know about it now and they're watching. So it'll be very interesting if, for example, 9/11, right? That was planned, obviously, years in advance, at least a year in advance by Dick Cheney and all those guys. The peanut, what do they call themselves? The New
Project
Century.
for a New American Century.
Yeah, Project for a New American Century. So that was all planned well in advance. What would have happened if in in August or in July, I put out a thing saying, I've been reading these documents, I've been seeing signs, I've been seeing these movements going on. I think they're planning a major terrorist false flag attack in September.
Well, actually, both Bill Cooper and Alex Jones did that. And I think they both fingered Osama bin Laden as the puppet they're going to use as the false flag mastermind.
Yeah, the Cooper guy got killed 2 months later, right?
Yep.
So who knows? Maybe we can stop this calamity by waking people up. So it's very interesting times.
Very interesting times. Well, absolutely. All right. Okay, let's end the conversation there, but not before noting that if for some reason the collapse doesn't occur, or if the collapse does occur, but you're looking for a party afterwards, apparently February 2016, they can join you in Anarchapulco, and the website for that is anarchapulco.com.
Yeah, that's right. And sort of a funny side note is we just announced the dates and the registration's open for it now, and we had hundreds of people say that they are definitely going to be coming, but no one's going to book their tickets till after September. So I guess I kind of screwed myself a little bit in that respect. They want to see, just make sure the world still exists, and then if getting into October and the world's still there, then they'll register.
It makes sense. All right, Jeff, we'll leave it there for today. Thanks for joining us.
Always a pleasure, James. Peace.